I want to give you a little bit of a history on how databases developed. It's very important to record data. Originally, everything was done on paper. And in 1880, actually, it started in 1880, where there was the U.S. Census had so much data that they kind of made a competition to see who can do it the best, who can tabulate data in the most efficient way. And Herman Holderith won. And therefore, in 1890, the U.S. Census was done using his method, which is punched cards. And you've probably heard the term punch cards, and that's when it originated. And people don't really use it now, except I'll show you some voting machines that do. But back then, it was the first time that things were not done with paper anymore, but were actually done using the punch cards for data storage. So now jump a lot of years, we're in 2000, and it's used, so I'll go backwards later, but this is to show you an example. But we have punch cards using computers. I'll talk about that in the next slide, but I wanted to show you this example where it is used in voting machines still. And this is 2000, where the punch cards actually cause confusion, because you think by 2000 we wouldn't be using this method anymore, but we kind of are. And here, this caused confusion with the election between Gore and Bush, where people thought they were voting for Gore. But if you see the second button, the second option is not Gore, it's actually Pat Buchanan. And instead of voting for Gore, they were voting for Pat Buchanan. And that was because we were using punch cards. And of course I talk about this in my design class. It's not designed very well, so you might think you're voting for Gore, but you actually aren't. But the reason I'm mentioning this here in this class is not for design. It's really just to show you how punch cards, how they can look, where you're punching something and you're punching it, and whether you punch it or not, that means something. All right, now going backwards. Now in 1940 again. So 1940s, 1950s, they're actually used in computers. Up through like 1980, we're using punch cards. So punch cards are being used in computers. And it's being used successfully. Here you have a picture. All right, but now we get to Apollo, the moon, and there was a lot of data, and a system was not able to actually handle all of this information. And in 1966, IBM joined with the NAA, and they developed IMS. And IMS is a database management system, but it uses hierarchical. So now you have to go back and remember my other video on hierarchical. So we used a hierarchical database management system to store the data. Now in mid-1960s, IDS. And IDS uses the network database management system. So again, watch my other video to see the difference between the hierarchical, network, and relational database management system. In 1960s, we're in network. Then we get to 1970, and now we're at the relational database, and which is the one we're using now, the one that is in table format, where we view it as a table, and that's what we're going to be doing. And this included SQL. Now, in 1976, we have Chen, and this is, we'll talk about the different notations later when we talk about ER diagrams. The second half of this course, we'll talk about ER diagrams, and that's when the ER diagrams came about, because while we do have tables, sometimes it's hard to visualize and view and understand what the table is showing us, and we can depict it in an entity relationship model, which we'll talk about later. I won't go into explaining this because we'll have many videos explaining this. And now, finishing up, we have our relational database management system. Oracle is an example. Sybase is an example. MySQL, you can pronounce it MySQL. You can also pronounce it MySQL, and both are correct. And then the one we're using is MySQL. We're going to use it as our database management system. Oracle acquires it, and that's kind of where we are today.